This morning, my one-on-one interview with Democratic candidate for governor, Dr. Amy Acton. Ahead on Face the State, I'll ask how her experience as director of the Ohio Department of Public Health during the COVID-19 pandemic shaped her as a candidate. Also, what are her top priorities and plans for helping the more than 11 million Ohioans if she becomes the next governor? Also, Republican candidate for governor Vivek Ramaswamy's take on paying teachers based on merit and phasing out the state income tax. Plus, taking the bus. 10 TV's Colin Dorsey went to Indianapolis to see how their bus rapid transit system is working. This as COTA starts building 3 lines in central Ohio that voters approved in November. Is it really faster than regular buses? Face the State starts now. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Today our focus is once again on the race for governor. The primary may be more than a year away, but the race itself is well underway. Last Sunday, I interviewed Republican candidate Heather Hill. This week, my guest is the lone Democratic candidate so far, Dr. Amy Acton. Dr. Acton became well known for helping to guide Ohioans through the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic as the director of the Ohio Department of Health. She stood with Governor Mike DeWine in the frequent news conferences about the virus's impact on the state and the response to the virus. According to her campaign website, after serving in the DeWine administration, Dr. Acton returned to the Columbus Foundation and helped found the Center for Human Kindness. She lives in Bexley with her husband, Eric. Together, they have 6 kids. This is her first run for public office. We'll talk with her in just a minute. On the Republican side, 3 candidates have entered the race so far. They are former presidential candidate and biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. Current Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost is now serving his 2nd term in office. And Morgan County small business owner and former president of the Morgan Local School Board, Heather Hill. Governor Mike DeWine cannot run for re-election because of term limits. Joining me now is Democratic candidate for Ohio Governor, Dr. Amy Acton. Dr. Acton, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I got to start just with why did you decide to run for governor?
Well, I had the honor and a privilege of serving, as you said, 11.7 million Ohioans alongside a governor, learned so much about this work. But I also formed a bond in COVID, and everywhere I've gone since, all over this state, people are sharing with me their struggles, what they're facing, and also their ideas for change. And I'm running for governor because I refuse to look the other way. While our state continues to go backwards on nearly every measure, we know it's time for a change.
Now, you're running as a Democrat, but how would you describe your political philosophy?
Oh, thank you. Well, I am a doctor. I am not a politician, as you mentioned. My last race was student council president in high school, which I did win.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But, I've spent my whole career as a problem solver and a public servant, certainly working with people on both sides of the aisle, because problems do not care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, they just need solved. And what Ohioans are telling me is that they're looking for public servants. They're looking for people who put our common good ahead of everything, that quit pitting us against one another. They want to see common sense problem solving, which, of course, Ohioans got to know me doing that alongside Governor DeWine. And they want common purpose and common good again.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, with that experience of going through COVID, such a tense time, a frightening time, what did you take away from that experience that you believe could help you as governor?
A lot of folks have looked at our leadership, the governor and I, during that time, and I have to tell you, it was an honor of a lifetime to serve in a moment like that. And, it was an unprecedented crisis we faced. Our main priority was, of course, saving lives, but we were also very focused on getting us back to work and getting us back to life as soon as possible. And what Ohioans should know is I'm very proud of what we did together. We saved lives. We flattened the curve. We have good data now that shows that. We lost more people in this country than all wars combined, all disasters combined with wars. And if you went in the ICU in March of 2020, a 50% chance of dying. By June, after just those few months, we'd gotten that down to 5%. But I can tell you, they said we led differently, and they talked a lot about the way I solve problems, which is being honest, putting the cards on the table, because I really needed Ohioans to lead everywhere they sat. I asked more of people. The governor and I asked more of people every day, and certainly Ohioans rode. I always say nothing I would have done would have saved those lives. It was really what we did together. Ohioans had heroism everywhere, and I hear those stories everywhere I go.
Can you describe the pressure of that situation, not only making the decisions about masks and closures and things like that, but the protesters that you faced, at your own home and things like that? How big, how intense was the pressure?
We were getting ready for COVID in January of 2020, so we had been doing all of government tabletop exercises as we saw this threat coming around the world. You are so focused. I can tell you that I fell in love with Ohioans. During that time, you can't want to save lives and not do everything you can every hour. So that was the focus. And yes, there were protests. We know the hate was real. There were anti-mask societies even back in 1918 in the Spanish flu. That was all anticipated in George W. Bush's playbook that had been passed from president to president. But the honor was we brought the best and the brightest around the table daily, hourly, solving problems that had never been solved before. I can tell you that that is a blueprint for how I've solved everything with the governor, even and all my work prior to that. We did an opiate settlement by using the same problem-solving technique. We worked on PFAS in our water supply. We worked on a Legionella outbreak in a local hospital. We worked on energy issues. The privilege of being a governor is that it's your job to get folks around the table and have the hard decisions and the hard conversations. And that's something I learned, a privilege of learning next to a governor and would bring to this job.
And I'll talk about politics and the race in a second, but a lot of people were wondering, why did you ultimately step down from the role?
Thank you for asking that. The media didn't get it quite right on that. A lot was said about the protesters. People need to understand that we had security issues from the very first day you saw me on TV. All of that was real. But the real reason I stepped down was Larry Householder and some folks in the State House once again wanting some special interests, special orders written that weren't based in the science and quarantine powers. Ultimately, I told the governor I would continue to advise him, and I have ever since continued to advise him on health issues, but I couldn't sign my name to something that I knew would harm Ohioans. 2 weeks later, we know that he was arrested in the largest scandal in Ohio's history. And I think that's one of the problems we face in our state is over many, many years, special interests, bad actors have had way too much influence instead of solving problems that Ohioans face every day.
Let's talk about that too. What do you see as your top priority? What issue really hits home with you?
Well, I can tell you what I'm hearing from Ohioans. I have been going around the state in the years since, and I plan to be going around the state. We're doing a more formal rollout in end of April to listen. But what I can tell you they are saying so far is top of mind is costs. People are working hard. They're working harder than they ever have, and they're still struggling to find enough breathing room, whether it's childcare, it's certainly eggs and gas that we hear about.
Right.
But they're talking about aging in place and their property taxes not outpacing them. They're talking about being able to afford medicines, childcare, schools. Public school is top of mind for folks all over the state. In rural areas and small towns, we don't recognize that 70 of our 88 counties only have public schools, and folks are very concerned about changes there. And people are talking about safety and being able to start businesses and thrive here. So I'm very focused on the things that we hold dear on both sides of the aisle and getting to solving the real pragmatic problems.
There's a lot of discussion right now about the budget proposals and funding for education, and then there's also the issue of vouchers that can be used for private schooling. Where do you stand on that?
Not everyone knows the backstory of my life, but I had a really tough childhood. I grew up in Youngstown, ended up in a tent in the middle of winter, a lot of abuse and neglect. moved 18 times before I was 12.
Wow.
And public schools help save my life. They are the thing that gives you a chance, no matter where you start out. We don't get to choose the accident of our birth. Schools, libraries, I think, are the great things that we have done collectively. We invented public education in the state. Not everyone knows that. Back when we did the Northwest Territory, we divided up the plots of land, and we always saved a spot for a public school because that's what binds us. And like I said, in 70 counties, it's all we have. It is a part of the way of life. It is our neighbors and our friends who work there. And everywhere I go, in small towns and rural and in urban settings, everyone is concerned about this attack on public schools. Our funding, which we finally had a bipartisan funding agreement that both sides agreed to. And I think it's imperative for our future as a state that we honor that.
The governor is now deciding whether to sign or veto Senate Bill 1,
Yes.
the Diversity and Equity and Inclusion
Yes.
bill that just passed in the Senate. It would also would eliminate those programs on college campuses
Yes.
and also prohibit faculty from striking. If you were governor, would you sign it or veto it?
You know, this is, and Governor and I can agree to disagree on a number of issues, but if I were governor, I would absolutely veto this bill, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this is terrible for our economy. We already know that we have the 45th level, 45th, we rank 45th in growth of GDP, and our biggest export is young people. This is dissuading businesses from coming to our state, some of these antics. It is definitely keeping students. You know, we attract tons of students from all over the country, and in fact, all over the world, because we have some of the finest educational institutions. I will also say that this is the biggest threat to collective bargaining since Senate Bill 5. I think it is a travesty in that sense. And you mentioned diversity. Look, diversity is our strength, not our weakness. I will always see it that way. And this is a bill that I think is dangerous. And I really do hope the governor takes a long look at this and what it means for our state.
Vivek Ramaswamy has floated the idea of phasing out the state
Yes.
income tax. Where do you stand on tax relief for Ohioans, and what would you do?
I can tell you Ohioans all over are very, very concerned about costs. And one of the hidden reasons they have to be so concerned about costs is a lot of the special interests and antics that really rule everything at our state house and have taken us backwards. Really, in our entire adult lives, we've been going backwards on every measure. Property taxes are going up, but they're going up because we're not doing our job at the State House and funding things like school. When you do not fund programs, that pushes it back down to the locals. We've been taking money away from local communities. I'm very much about empowering local communities. But that then means they have to go to the ballot. They have to go to us for police and fire and education. So it's actually, and even the governor has said, we have done enough in lowering income taxes to attract businesses. What we have to do is make sure that we're fully funding the work that Ohioans have asked us to do as public servants. And that is actually not sustainable. And Vivek is attacking both ends of the spectrum, but obviously that goes back to our safety and our fire and our police and our kids getting a good education.
Well, I know that there's a long way to go until the primary. Thank you so much for making time today to come in and express your views. I appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor, and it'll be an honor and a privilege to serve the people of Ohio.
Dr. Amy Acton.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, still ahead on Face the State, how to pay teachers and why we shouldn't pay income taxes. As we were talking about, Republican candidate for governor Vivek Ramaswamy explains 2 big changes he would make if he wins the race. Plus, the controversial higher education bill on diversity, equity, and inclusion is now going to the governor. Will he sign it? Will he veto it? We asked him for his perspective on the bill and its impact on conversations on campus. Welcome back to Face the State. I got a chance this week to talk to a man who wants to be Ohio's next governor. Vivek Ramaswamy says he believes changes to the teacher pay structure could help solve education challenges. The Republican candidate for governor told me paying teachers based on merit will attract the best teachers to the state. Ramaswamy delivered the keynote address Wednesday afternoon at the Asian American Commerce Group Summit. He told the crowd Ohio faces three great challenges in the next decade. First, improving the electric grid to handle power needs. Second, reversing what he calls the population crisis of more people moving out of the state than moving in. And finally, improving educational achievement. He says one way to do that is by paying teachers based on merit.
The average starting salary for a public school teacher in this state and across the country is around $45,000. It's unacceptable because it's not going to attract the very best into education. At the same time, how do we make sure that public school teachers are paid more? If we do it according to meritocracy, there's an opportunity to at once attract and reward the very best public school teachers. That's important to me. I'm a product of public education in this state, while at the same time making sure we're doing right by our students.
As I mentioned, Ramaswamy also calls Ohio's declining population a crisis. He wants to turn that around, and he says one way to do that is to phase out the state income tax. Why do you think that would work, and what about paying for the vital services that income tax pays for?
Look, the fact of the matter is I said we need to get to a zero income tax rate. What I said on day one is we need to bring down the income tax eventually down to zero. And the reason why is we need to be able to compete with 8 other states that have done the same thing. You want to know one of the biggest problems in our state that nobody's talking about is that we have a population decline issue in the state of Ohio. We have more people moving out than in.
Ramaswamy says more people moving into the state would solve the worker shortage, and the economic boom that would follow will cover a lot of the losses of eliminating the income tax. He says he would also work to cut areas where expenditures aren't really helping anyone today. He did not give specifics on that. At the State House, a bill that has sparked controversy and protests has passed in the General Assembly. The Advance Ohio Higher Education Act is now heading to Governor Mike DeWine's desk. Senate Bill 1 passed in the state Senate by a vote of 20-11, with 2 Republicans joining Democrats in voting against it. The bill removes DEI programs from Ohio's colleges and universities and prevents faculty from striking. Supporters say it will increase diversity by moving discussions more to the center and including more conservative viewpoints.
Whether or not we have a say in what goes on in our universities, if we don't have a say, then the people don't have a say.
Instead of tackling the real barriers to higher education, skyrocketing tuition costs, student debt, again, the majority are focused on dictating what's taught in our colleges and universities and who teaches.
The bill would also decrease term limits for state school board of trustees and create a mandatory American civics course for students. Governor Mike DeWine says he will likely sign the bill, but is now reviewing the final version of it. 10 TV asked him about his views on the bill.
I think there's been a concern that our college campuses sometimes are liberal, but I think the real concern should be, are there situations where somebody who has a different point of view feels that they cannot express that point of view. And I think that's the real goal that I see, at least as I read this bill. You can be a liberal on a college campus, you can be a conservative, you can be whatever you want to be. That's the place where you have the free exchange of ideas. I remember when I was a kid in high school, William F. Buckley came to Antioch College and spoke. And I went there to watch it. It was fun to watch it. And they were all over him, but there was no one that said he can't speak. There was no one that said, oh no, we got to get him out of here. He can't stand up there and speak. They respected the First Amendment. They respected the right of Buckley to speak, but then they got up and asked him very, very tough questions and argued with him. That's what we want to see. That's what we want to see is people learn how to debate, learn how to not only have an opinion, but have that opinion based upon some facts and have to back up that with facts. That's part of learning.
Governor DeWine has 10 days to sign or veto the bill after he receives it. Still ahead on Face the State, voters gave COTA millions of dollars to build 3 rapid transit bus lines to move commuters around central Ohio faster. Indianapolis already has this type of bus system, so we went there to find out how well it works. A new and faster way to get around Central Ohio. We've been telling you about bus rapid transit for months. Central Ohio Transit Authority, or COTA, is building 3 lines in Central Ohio because voters approved the Link Us ballot initiative in the last election. Bus rapid transit has been compared to light rail, but on wheels. But we wanted to know, how well does it really work? So 10 TV's Colin Dorsey traveled 170 miles to a city that already has them to test them out.
The rapid transit portion of Link Us is to make getting around on those a bit faster, but it's still a couple years off in the future, so we got in the car and hit the road. And we headed west, here to Indianapolis, where they've had rapid transit for several years, and it got us a chance to look at what does and doesn't work. Getting on this bus was as easy as scanning my phone and walking on, but I started a timer to see just how fast it really is.
We set our speed. We don't have to slow down when a slow car gets in front of us. We don't have to change lanes. So I think you feel the efficiency when you're on it.
Indianapolis's public transit system, Indigo, has 2 rapid transit routes with a 3rd on the way. These extra long bendy buses get a lane of their own, picking up passengers in the middle of the street.
This intersection, they're going to go ahead and get the right of way, and we wait. But there are occasions where the bus will go through and the cars wait on us.
Unlike traditional bus lines, rapid transit has the perks of fewer stops and priority at intersections, in theory, speeding up the ride. Our trip was about 4 miles on the city's Purple Line. From where we got on to where we got off at Post and 38th took just 11 minutes, and that's without the stop-and-go traffic and all the intersections. If you had to walk that, it would take the average paced walker about an hour and a half. Some riders say rapid transit is a big improvement.
10-15 minutes run, so yeah, a lot of the other buses run 30 minutes, 45 minutes. They definitely are a lot faster.
For others,
you stop a lot, so it makes it like time slows down and you might be a little late for work.
It still stops too much, but it beats paying for a cab.
What are some of the hurdles that you faced?
I sat down with one of the people behind the project, Indigo President and CEO Jennifer Pierce.
The red line was really challenging for us, especially the people that lived along the route or worked along the route, to sort of trust us to build what we said we were going to build.
The red line was the city's first rapid transit line. Between that line and the newer Purple Line, they found some improvements that needed to happen. Ways to make the buses get closer to the stations, speed up stop times, and reduce costly maintenance on the island stations.
Has Indianapolis's bus rapid transit really driven some development in the city?
Absolutely, and it's interesting because it's happening before the lines are even built. So the red line was our first line, and that one, people weren't so sure.
Along the Purple Line, this grocery store now fills a void in what was once a food desert. Goodwill has a job center, and there's also a health clinic, all a few steps away from a stop on the line.
I wouldn't say bus rapid transit's always going to be faster than the car, but I think we really strive for it being equivalent to the car.
Indianapolis is working on finishing its 3rd and final line, the Blue Line. That line is expected to be done in 2027 or 2028. That's the same time that Columbus's first rapid transit line is expected to be done, the Broad Street Corridor. In Indianapolis, Colin Dorsey, 10 TV News.
And that's all of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. We'll see you back here next Sunday at 11:30.